Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the SAFc Registry launch webinar. We're really excited to see a lot of familiar faces, but also quite some new faces here joining us. We're here as RMI, EDF, SABA, and EnergyWeb to celebrate the launch of this new tool, the SAFc Registry, which we've designed over the last few years to help bring more consistency and transparency and credibility to the emerging SAFc market. SAFc or SAF certificates are already making a huge impact in the SAF voluntary market, but we've created this tool as our group of organizations to help even further that objective and encourage the new industry to scale. So today, my name is Laura Hutchinson. I'm a manager at RMI, and I contribute to our work as the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance, help lead our efforts towards this SAFc registry effort. Today, I'm joined by colleagues at EDF, at SABA, at Deloitte, and at EnergyWeb to help present this new and exciting tool. Today, we'll go through a quick introduction. We'll hear some remarks from Kim Carnahan and Lisa Newman-Wise about why the SAFc registry launch is exciting and important from their perspectives. Then we'll go into an overview of the tool itself, and then we'll launch into a demo led by my colleague Wendell Cathcart. And then we'll finish off with a couple logistical items as presented by my colleague Ishwan Bart from EDF. And we'll close out with a Q&A session at the very end. I encourage you throughout the session, if questions occur to you, to already populate them in this Q&A function in the chat here. We'll make sure that we try to answer all of your questions, or at least the majority of them, at the end of the session. But again, definitely encourage you to populate those throughout. And for now, I'll go ahead and pass the baton to my colleague, Kim. Kim is the lead of SABA's Secretariat and is the CEO of Neoteric Energy and Climate. Kim, would you like to join us and say a few words about the registry? Thanks again for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks, Laura. And thanks to everybody who's here. I actually want to first start out by just saying congratulations. This is an amazing achievement and something that really, it's taken us quite a while to get to. And so really happy to see this day come. As Laura just said, I've been managing the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance since we launched back in 2021. And I came to SABA kind of pretty straight from time at the US State Department, where I managed the team negotiating international climate negotiations, including those happening at the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, on CORSIA, or the Carbon and Offset Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. And during all of those negotiations, the most prominent theme was SAF is going to save our industry. It is going to be the lever that is responsible for the overwhelming majority of decarbonization in this space for the foreseeable future. And there was so clearly a need to empower not just airlines to get more SAF into their airplanes, or air transport operators to get more SAF into their airplanes, but also the customers who were willing to pay the premium and support this incredibly important technology. And even back then, when we were still fighting over all kinds of things, SAF was barely a word most people knew, most corporate customers knew, and SAF certificates was a concept that was only then being created. Even then, it was very clear and a very common request from early stage companies that we were engaging with, saying that we needed a registry, and we needed a registry that we could trust, that would be robust, that would be transparent. And everyone agreed on this. And I think SABA was, if not the first, one of the very first entities that committed publicly to creating a registry so that not just our members, but the broader community could also use this registry and be comfortable and confident in their investments they were making in SAF. And even though at this point now, a few years later, we've certainly been joined by a couple of other registries in this space, I'm still very confident that that the SAF certificate registry plays a unique role in the registry space, not just for being nonprofit or independently managed or universally accessible or open to, supporting the players across the value chain, but really for doing all of those things at the same time. And so I'm really happy to see the SAFc Registry launch today. I think it's going to be an amazingly important tool for companies to convey to their stakeholders and their auditors their investments that they're making in the SAF space. I think it's going to be an incredibly important tool that airlines and other transport providers can use when transmitting the attributes that are being purchased by their customers, making sure that those get to them transparently and with a great amount of data associated with it. And I think it's going to be important for eventually regulators who want to come in and understand this market that we've been working to create over the last 2 years. So with that, I'll pass back to Laura. Super excited, incredibly glad to see this happen. And again, congratulations for this amazing achievement.
Thank you so much, Kim. Now I'd like to invite Lisa Newman-Wise, who leads Deloitte US's internal sustainability efforts, to say a few words. She's been a really core contributor to SABA's efforts since our founding. So thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Laura and team, for having me here. I am very excited for the launch of the SAFc Registry and want to applaud SABA and the broader RMI team for the efforts over the last year plus in getting this registry built and launched. Deloitte US has been involved in SAF certificate transactions for coming on 3 years, and we have transacted with multiple airlines as well as multiple fuel producers. And so far, those transactions have all been delivered in a variety of manners, and the evolution towards digital registries, as we wrote about in a white paper about 2 years ago, has been essential to increase transparency, credibility, and, as Kim said, provide more confidence in these purchases as environmental, financial instrument, or attribute transactions begin to grow in frequency and in price, as well as impact. So we're particularly excited about the SAFc Registry, and because of the really inclusive and open process of its development. So SABA members were invited to be beta testers and provide feedback to make the registry more usable and functional for customers as well as vendors. And the rulebook consultation was actually a public process as well. So the real openness and inclusivity is something that has been really wonderful to see as additional registries are coming to the market, and we are going to be entering a new stage of SAF certificate transactions with these multiple registries available, and we are excited as a customer to start to receive SAF certificate deliveries through the SAFc Registry in the coming months. So thanks again, Laura, and I'll let you now do an intro for the functionality of the registry.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Let me just pop my slides back up here. Fantastic. Excellent. So kicking right back off, I'll provide a few minutes of introduction as to how the SAFc Registry works, and then I'll pass off to my colleague Wendell, who will provide a detailed demo of the platform. But I'll start off with just a few words about why this matters to us. So SAF certificates are a key tool to enable voluntary investment in SAF, especially for customers of aviation services who don't ordinarily buy jet fuel. The key opportunity here is really to speed up SAF deployment through voluntary interventions that go above and beyond existing policy efforts. As Kim spoke about and Lisa spoke about, SAFc is already at work driving impact. SAFc offtakes are simultaneously enabling customers of aviation services to directly address their aviation emissions and plan to meet their climate targets, airlines and carriers to invest in and offtake more fuel in partnership with customers, and SAF producers to secure advanced offtake agreements for their products and secure project financing to build more capacity. In other words, SAFc can and already is creating a win-win-win. So what exactly is it? A SAF certificate represents the environmental attributes of a metric ton of neat or unblended SAF. In other words, a SAFc represents all of the sustainability criteria, including effective emissions reductions as compared to conventional jet fuel associated with a specific SAF volume. When it's purchased, a SAFc basically represents a volume of SAF that has displaced conventional jet fuel and represents the benefits of that displacement. This SAFc can be unbundled from the physical fuel volume and sold separately. SAFc builds from robust certification schemes and standards. The SAFc Registry leverages RSB, the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials, and ISCC, or the International Sustainability and Carbon Certification System standards. So this includes the CORSIA standard, the EU RED standard, the ISCC Plus standard, the RSB Global standard. All of these schemes validate and verify that SAF supply chains are sustainable. The registry also follows the requirements of the RSB Book and Claim Manual, or their standard that defines how book and claim should work for SAF, which includes an additional certification step called the Trader certification to ensure that no double counting occurs in the transition between this mass balance and book and claim system. The final step here is climate disclosure, which we hope that the registry will be used as a tool to facilitate, but fundamentally the disclosure step happens outside of the registry itself. As Kim talked about, this is one of many things that we've been working on as SABA, the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance, for the last 3 or so years. But this is in many ways the culminating effort that helps create the tangible place where all of these myriad pieces of market infrastructure come together. So the sustainability framework helps customers identify which SAF volumes, which SAF supply chains meet their sustainability criteria. The accounting guidance helps customers and other folks in the aviation value chain understand what their disclosure options and processes can look like. And the SAF certificate registry is the place where the fuel is turned into a certificate to support that disclosure. Our collective procurement processes as SABA are the place where the purchases are actually directly facilitated, but we hope that the registry will be used as a key tool in this process to add even more clarity and credibility to the process. So moving along to some of the core functionalities of the system, at a principles level, the SAFc registry is designed to enhance user trust. This includes making sure that consistency is intact by implementing standardized processes for registering, transferring, and retiring certificates. We also prioritize sustainability by providing certified data on the sustainability attributes of each batch of fuel, and by clarifying which sustainability criteria and thresholds each SAF certificate corresponds to. We ensure that double counting is mitigated, or that valid claims for each batch of SAF are only made once for each intervention, including managing double counting between voluntary and compliance use. And 2 more pieces here, we prioritize transparency by providing a public retirement ledger of the existing certificates in the platform. And the final piece here is that the system is independent. It's owned by nonprofit entities, and it'll be governed by a multilateral governing board. Going deeper into this governance model, here's a little bit of depth there. The registry is managed by a couple different decision-making bodies. Technically, RMI manages the contract with EnergyWeb, who serves as our registry developer and administrator. The registry executive committee is comprised of RMI, EDF, and SABA, SABA's secretariat. We are convening and facilitating what we call the registry governing board, which will be the composition of which will be announced in early 2024. So stay tuned for that. And this structure is really designed to provide the market with a mechanism to influence the use of this tool and the mechanisms here, but also to ensure that the system is functioning in a way that's independent and credible over time. All right, some functionality pieces here before I pass it over to Wendell. I just want to emphasize that the registry is really a tool that creates the certificates themselves. It's not a marketplace. It's not a trading platform. It doesn't capture any pricing information, but rather is the place where SAF certificates are born, transferred, and retired to substantiate that climate disclosure. So before the platform comes into play, the purchase contracts are signed, fuel is produced, fuel supply chains are certified, and the registry really only comes into play once those preconditions are met. So the registry is the place where folks can look to as a ledger of what's actually happening with these fuel supply chains and what do the SAF certificates that folks are committing to purchase actually represent when push comes to shove. All right, one more set of detail, and then I'll pass it over to Wendell here. So some core things to keep in mind in advance of the demo here there's two primary types of SAF certificates. There's a SAFc, which is for air transport provider claims, or what is colloquially known as a Scope 1 claim. The second piece is a SAFc, which corresponds to an end user claim for customers of aviation services, as well as logistics service providers. And there's three differentiators of these types of SAF certificates. The first being a sustainability tier, in which we make a differentiation between an SCS eligible unit, which is kind of our universally applicable, needs to meet a certification threshold, but that's it. And any SAF can be registered into the platform. And then our two SABA eligible and SABA preferred tiers that correspond to a higher level of sustainability thresholds and checks. The second piece here is what we call a usability tier, which differentiates between SAF certificates that can be used for voluntary purchases or voluntary use, voluntary disclosure versus compliance use. The third piece here is assurance level, which corresponds to the level of certification, level of verification for an underlying SAF supply chain. So every SAF certificate, when it enters the platform, is in a validated state, which indicates that the underlying certification is intact and valid. Revalidation indicates that that certification still exists a year later when the certification is due to be renewed. And a verified status indicates that that certification status has been directly kind of augmented by a certification body or an auditor, which can happen in unique circumstances or on an opt-in basis as determined by a fuel provider and their auditors. Last piece here, we've really designed the SAFc registry to enhance the user experience as much as possible while maintaining these critical sustainability safeguards. In this sense, the registry is designed to create a very flexible user experience that can mimic the underlying structure of any procurement context. So enabling any actor to initiate a transaction and allowing for transfers to occur between multiple parties in any sequence. All right, with this, I'll pass it off to Wendell.
Great, thanks so much, Laura. Let me share my screen and please let me know if you see, the homepage. Brilliant. Well, thanks again. Hi, everyone. As Laura mentioned, I'm Wendell Cathcart, and I lead the team at EnergyWeb that developed the SAFc Registry website. And as Laura mentioned, in addition to developing the site, we'll also be serving as a registry admin to support registry users moving forward. And as part of this, we'll also have a roadmap for expanding and improving on the registry over time. Our main goal is to make it as useful as possible to users. So please don't be shy with your feedback that you share with us, with the project team, with Laura, etc. So we'll start with a live demo on the homepage here. And just for your information, we'll be looking at the testing website today, which is almost identical to the production website that is live at safcregistry.org now. But the main difference is that we can issue and retire certificates and they don't affect production data. And also if you have any questions that arise during the demo, please post them in the chat and we'll address them in the Q&A section. So we'll just linger on the homepage for a few beats. I wanted to point out a few key resources here before we hop inside the registry. First is there's a button to register your company. This is to get your company set up on the registry and to go through the onboarding process. There's also a number of documents and things to review about the registry before you are onboarding. I believe our colleague Ispan will double click on these at a later, right after the demo, but those include the user guide, the rule book, and FAQs. And if I scroll down a little bit further, we see some more logistics documents to review. And then importantly, we have the public retirement table. This is a table where all SAF certificate retirements are displayed publicly and kept for posterity. And after we go through a key user journey on the platform and do two retirements of our own, today, we'll go back to the retirement table and see them there. So we're going to hop into the registry now. This is a view of a user who's logged into the registry after going through the registration process for their company, setting up accounts, logging in, of course. And here you can see on the left-hand side, the navigation bar shows us that we're in the holdings section. This is where SAF certificate holdings are represented. So it's where most of the action on the registry takes place. And here we can see that we're logged in as an account called SAFco Fuels. And that's an account of type fuel provider holding account. This is reserved for fuel producers or fuel providers who issue SAF certificates on the registry. And then scrolling down just a tiny bit on this page, we can see the active holdings that this account possesses. We have 4 active certificates. And if I hover over the unit type code, this is this column in the table, we can illustrate some of those data items that Laura was just describing. So there's the type of the unit, if it's a SAFC-A or SAFC-E. There's the sustainability tier, the usability tier, and then the assurance level. That's the assurance level is the last 3 characters in the unit type code. And then moving forward in the table, we have the amount of neat SAF that this particular SAF certificate represents. And a related field is the tons of CO2e abated. This is related to the tons of SAF because based on the LCA value for the underlying SAF, we can calculate how many tons of CO2 were not emitted into the atmosphere. We also have the status of the certificate, its expiry date, and the country where it was produced. And so we'll be returning to this page just in a moment after we do an issuance. You can see that there are some other buttons for performing different functions on SAF certificates, and we'll get to use some of those as well. So let's hop into the issuance process now. You do so as a field provider by clicking Issue SAFc. Here, we're greeted with a cover page that explains the process, links to relevant documentation to ensure that the field producer really understands exactly what it's going to take to complete this process. And here we have the SAFc-A issuance form. It's blank, as you can see, and I'm going to, much like a cooking show, switch us over to a form that I already pre-filled before starting the demo. So here you can see what it looks like when all these fields are filled out, including that we provided the document, this is in this case the proof of sustainability document that we uploaded here that contains all of the key information about the underlying SAF that will be porting over to the SAF certificate itself. The rest of the form features an assortment of data inputs. I think there are about 50 in total. And these are for different data types. We have tooltips and also explanatory text, as well as some data validation to help the user avoid making any mistakes while they're entering all these fields. Also, noteworthy. If you go to the certification tab, we have this particular batch of fuel is for the underlying SAF has the RSP Corsia certification scheme, and the default LCA value applies to this fuel as well. And this is important because based on the certification scheme that the user declares, the form will actually provide them with a unique set of questions in this greenhouse gas information tab that are relevant to RSP Corsia specifically, or one of the other certification schemes. And lastly, I'll just pick on the product info tab. We'll see that the feedstock for this particular batch that we'll be issuing is waste oil, and it will be issuing a SAF certificate that represents the attributes of underlying 42 metric tons of neat SAF. So I'm going to click submit, and this will take us to our second to last step of the issuance process. What you see here, apologies, what you see here is, again, some of the logic that illustrates what Laura was presenting a few slides ago. We can see that based on the fields that we provided to the platform, this SAF certificate qualifies for the sustainability tier B. It qualifies for a usability tier 2, which means that it's eligible for voluntary use. And here you can see some other calculated metrics about the SAF. It's adjusted LCA, and that's reductions in GHG emissions relative to conventional jet fuel. So I'm going to click submit. And, we understand that it might be time consuming to submit about 50 data fields each time you want to do an issuance. So moving forward, we can actually use another tool that we developed called Issue Similar, that allows the fuel producer who's issuing multiple batches of SAFc to pre-fill the issuance form based on a previous issuance. So that's intended to save some time. Now, also in the background is a process of approving this issuance request that needs to be completed by the registry administrator. So I'm actually going through that process now, just very quickly. In practice, this process requires a fair amount of data validation, document review, certification review, but for demo purposes, I'm just clicking through it. And once that is complete, we'll see our newly issued SAF certificate in our holdings account. So here we see this shiny new SAF certificate that represents the attributes of 42 tons of neat SAF. And to highlight something else Laura mentioned, we designed the SAFc Registry with flexibility in mind to satisfy quite a wide range of business relationships and needs. So let's walk through a likely scenario, and it was actually represented on that slide Laura showed. Let's say that we, as the fuel provider, have a standing contract with an airline to offtake all of the SAFc that we produce. And let's go ahead and transfer this SAFc that we just issued to our airline partner. So I'm going to do that by selecting the SAFc that I want to transfer. And you can see some different options popped up. I'm going to click transfer. And here you can see I've actually already bookmarked the airline that is our partner that we'd like to, and we'll be sending multiple SAF certificates to over time. And I can do this. I can actually add this different accounts as trusted to make them show up at the top of this transfer list. So once you've selected the account that is the recipient of your transfer, we can see some other summary of that transfer event, the sending account, the receiving account, and then we can transfer the certificate in whole or in part. So here by default is selected 42 volume of the certificate will be transferred to the airline 1 account. And you can see here that we also have the option to denominate a transfer in CO2, tons of CO2. In some cases, some business cases, they maybe will be dealing in certificates or in tons of CO2 instead of the tons of SAF. And so we have this as an option to meet those needs. Let's just go ahead and transfer the full amount to our airline partner. And I click submit to initiate that transfer. We're not quite done yet. So before transfer can be completed, it needs to be accepted by the recipient account. In this case, you can see here, we're still looking at the fuel provider account, and in our pending actions, we can see that there's a pending acceptance for a transfer that we initiated. And if we just determine that we'd made a mistake, sent it to the wrong account or sent the wrong amount, we also have the option to cancel this transfer before it is accepted. So now I'm going to be changing accounts to the airline account so that we can accept that transfer and complete the rest of this user journey. So I'm just doing that by changing the account that we're looking at here in the holdings page. This isn't necessarily realistic. In many cases, the fuel provider and the airline partner wouldn't necessarily be owned by the same company or managed by the same individual as you're seeing on the screen now. But for the sake of the demo, this is expedient and convenient. So please just bear with me there. The airline account gets to decide if they want to accept or reject this transfer. So we'll go ahead and accept it, which will put it into our active account holdings. So in this scenario, we're the airline, we've received the SAF certificate from our fuel provider partner. And let's say that we want to accomplish two things with this shiny new SAF certificate in our possession. We want to retire the scope 1 attributes of the SAF for our own airline. And we also want to transfer the scope 3 attributes of the same SAF to a logistics provider who is our partner. To accomplish this, we use a function called unbundle, which will break those two scope 1 and scope 3 aspects of this certificate apart so that they can move and be retired independently. So I've selected this certificate here. I click unbundle. The unbundling comes with some restrictions and requirements for the end users. So we have a couple points here to explain that, to ensure that the person really understands what's happening, that they're not making any mistakes. We can unbundle the entire certificate or do it partially. So let's unbundle the entire certificate. And then once again, we agree to complete this action. And what we'll see now is two new certificates in our active holdings. The first one is a SAFc that has been unbundled, and it can't be unbundled again. And if you look into the tooltip, it explains that. And then if you're also interested in how this all works, please do check out the rule book and the user guide. The second certificate is a SAFc. This is the scope 3 certificate that is going to be that we're going to be sending to our logistics provider partner. So before we do that, let's go ahead and retire the SAFc for our own airline and for our own climate disclosure purposes. Do that by selecting the certificate we'd like to retire. Click retire units. And then the first page is a detailed inventory of information about the certificate. And then there's a warning that we can retire this in its entirety. We can't partially retire the certificate. Again, the reasoning for that is detailed in the rule book. So I'd recommend checking that out. The second step is to say the year in which we'll be claiming this in our climate disclosure. So let's use 2023 for that. And then we will declare if this disclosure will be for international or domestic purposes. So let's change that to domestic. And then here we have a summary page, and then we have completed the retirement of the SAFc. So now we'll be doing a similar transfer and then retirement process for the logistics provider account. So first we'll select the SAFc that we want to transfer to the logistics provider. I'm going to search for the account. It's called SAFco Logistics. You can see it down here. And then we can transfer the certificate in its entirety or partially. Let's do it in its entirety. And then we have a similar process for accepting the transfer that we saw for the airline. So I'm going to change to the logistic provider account. and we're going to accept the transfer. And here it is in our active holdings. And then finally, we're going to retire this SAFCE. So the retirement process for a SAFCE for a logistics company is a little bit different for that of an airline or a general holding account. So we'll see that the first page is pretty similar, except for we can do a partial retirement. We could retire 40 out of 42 tons of SAF, for instance, if we wish. We similarly select the year in which we'll be using this as in our disclosure. The difference that we have is that when you're retiring a SAFCE, you can designate the beneficiary of that underlying SAFCE claim. And by default, the beneficiary is the company that owns the account that is doing the retirement. But we can also specify a legal or natural person who will be the beneficiary of the SAFCE. And as a logistics provider, let's say we want to designate one of our customers as the SAFCE beneficiary. So we'll designate them here. And in the production environment, the email that's specified would receive a notification that there was a retirement on your behalf. So John would receive a notification. And here we have a summary of the retirement specifications, and we have now completed the SAFCE retirement. So now that we've retired both the SAFC-A and SAFC-E as part of this scenario that we described, the last step is to let's check out the retirement table and explore what it means from a public disclosure perspective to have done these retirements. So here we can see the top 2 retirements on the public retirement table correspond to the retirements we just did. Here's the SAFC-A that the airline retired, and the company that retired that SAFC-A is designated here in this column called the Air Transport Provider Beneficiary for the Scope 1 emissions reductions claim. So that's SAFCO, that's the company that owns the airline account that we used to retire this unit. And then the next certificate up that we just retired is the SAFCE that was retired by the logistics provider account. And here we can see there's actually 2 different beneficiaries listed. The end user beneficiary is John Doe, that's the customer of the logistics provider account. And then a unique attribute of logistics providers on the registry is that when you retire on behalf of another customer or one of your customers, you're also included in the retirement statement. So here you can see the company that owns a logistics provider account is also listed here. Scrolling over, you can see these 2 certificates that we retired are identical. They're based on the same underlying SAF. So here they have the same feedstock, same carbon intensity score, same origin. One other interesting and useful tool of the retirement table are the individual unit pages for retired units. So this is actually a publicly accessible and static link to a list of information about that retired certificate. This can be embedded in a disclosure, send an email. You can do anything with this URL for this particular page. And here on the page itself, you can see the details of the retired certificate, including some information that flowed through from the issuance phase and other information that tracks the activities and what happened to this certificate after it was issued and before it was retired. So this is useful for documentation purposes. And then the last point I'll make on the documentation front is that this retirement table itself can actually be filtered and exported. And it when you click export, it produces an Excel file that can then be stored for posterity or shared as your organization needs for its reporting purposes. So that concludes the live demo. Thanks for your attention. I'm excited to see the questions that you might have had. And I think with that, I'll hand it off to our colleague Istvan for the next step.
Hi, yes, thank you very much, Wendell, for handing it over. With that done, I would like to provide some information on a few logistical bits. First of all, there is something which is called terms and conditions. Wendell, could you please show that to the users? The terms and conditions is a standard document that is very typical of all websites that you use. You need to sign that in order to be able to use the system. So that's there, and it's available on our website. Now going back to the registry side, could you please show, Wendell, the fees? So the fee structure here, you can see the fee structure. We have annual fees, very important. It's charged per company, not per account, which means that you can have as many accounts as you want. Notably, an airline can have both airline and aviation customer accounts, for example. So there is no limitation on that. The other important thing is that only the fuel providers, the air transport providers, and the logistic service providers have to pay a fee annually, and whereas the aviation customers, so end users, will have to will be allowed to use the system for free. There is a special reactivation fee, which is useful in cases a company suspends its accounts and reactivates them. We want to sort of disincentivize that. And then I think if you scroll further down, Wendell, there is yes, and there is the issuance fee. That's quite important. So every SAF certificate is issued needs to pay $3 per metric ton of neat SAF. Okay. The other thing I would like to direct your attention to is the user guide. This is going to be, if you become a user, and we very much hope that you will become a user, this will be a very important resource for you, because it gives a hands-on description on how to do things on the registry, with very detailed descriptions on the various actions. Maybe, Wendell, you could show us the section on issuance, for example, of how it works, so that people are able to, I think it's under account actions. So people are able to see that, yes, this is done in a very simple way that is going to be easy for you to understand. And this will be your Bible for using the registry. And then finally, there is one document which is also something that is important to look at, which is the rule book. The rule book contains the functional specifications of the registry. So it's a more concise description of what's going on. This document is useful for understanding what the roles of various players in the system are. And also, I can recommend you to look at the annexes, because the annexes are shown in a tabular format, many of the actions that are happening in the system. So, for example, if you look at Annex, I think it's Annex E, where you can see all the flow charts for evaluating how a unit becomes SCS eligible, SABA eligible, or SABA preferred. So that's also a useful resource to learn more about how the registry works. And finally, I think I would like to mention that all this that you can see here is publicly available. And that certainly makes our registry unique, that even without opening an account, you can learn a lot about how this system works and understand it and decide whether this is something for you. Thank you very much. Let me hand it back.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Now we'll transition into the Q&A portion of the session. We've been getting a ton of really great questions in the chat here. We've already done our best to answer a good chunk of them, but at this point, I'll start answering a few of them live, myself and my colleagues here, and we'll continue to answer some in the background as well as the session comes to an end. So let me select our first question here. we got a great question from Ted White saying, I am a customer that's purchasing certificates to meet their own sustainability travel metrics. Are we responsible for retiring our own certificates? If so, how do we know when to do so? So this is a great question. Also, I want to emphasize that there isn't just one way to do this in the registry platform. What we recommend is that a customer of aviation services establish their own GHA or general holding account to give them the most agency and visibility over the SAF certificates that they're using towards their climate disclosure. But this isn't the only way that the SAFc Registry can be used. So as Wendell demonstrated, you can have SAF certificates and SAFCE in particular transferred to you, and you can initiate and run through that retirement process on your own behalf as a GHA holder. But also a SAFCA holder, so an air transport provider holding account or a logistics service provider holding account, or a fuel provider that establishes its own GHA can initiate and follow through that retirement on your behalf. So what we recommend is that for any given entity that's planning to use SAF certificates and SAFCE in particular towards your climate disclosure, is that you establish your own accounts in the registry, and especially for those corporate customers of aviation services, given that the use of this platform comes at no direct cost to you. Establishing your own accounts gives you more agency in the process and enables you to initiate that retirement, select a retirement year, select a disclosure year. But if there's a preference to not use the platform directly, that's also an option. Fantastic. Selecting our next question here. We got a question about how long the website has been in active development. Wendell, would you like to pop in and share some information about our development process?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting about a year ago, actually it was in the fall of last year, we went through a requirements gathering process with our friends at RMI and EDF, and understood that the nature of the requirements for the underlying SAP tools, and explored some of the functionalities that we wanted to build together. So I think that the design and architecture we completed very early this year, so January or February, and then we worked for about, I guess it was maybe 10 months on actually deploying the first version that we went to the beta testing with, and then the second version, which we completed beta testing with a few months back, and then we deployed just last month. So it's been a pretty tight timeline, but it's been a really great learning opportunity as the nature and requirements of the SAF certificate space has become clearer and clearer to us.
Thanks, Wendell. I'm seeing another question about, can the fuel producer generate both SAFCA and SAFCE for the same batch of SAF and transfer both of those certificates to the airline buying the SAF? Yes, that is one of the ways in which the platform can be used. So the fuel provider holding account initially has the capabilities to create and go through the process of issuing a SAF certificate A, SAFCA, and they can either immediately transfer that on to a different account type, or they can already unbundle the SAFCE and transfer them together or separately. So this is one of the ways that the platform is quite flexible. I've got another question from Tinashe Chenenberry. How is the data submitted for issuance of the SAFC verified? Wendell, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things there. So there's the underlying document that is provided at the time of the issuance. So this is the POS document typically, and so that is confirmed or reviewed against the information that was provided in the form. But then there's also the certifications that are publicly accessible for fuel providers. And so we're cross-referencing the information about the fuel with the POS document, and it gets public data sources about the underlying fuel provider.
Great, thanks, Wendell. All right, doing another scroll. There are so many questions. It's hard to choose which ones. They're all so fantastic. One from Rob Neal, where will the registry have similar functionality to carbon registries where master entities, which are not fuel logistics providers, can virtually retire units on behalf of a third party and issue SAFc for air transport providers and SAFc for other Scope 3 stakeholders, e.g. an aggregator retiring units on behalf of a corporate? So yes, this is something that the registry does enable in this general holding account or GHA type. The only kind of core requirement is that for the issuance of SAFc, that needs to be done by an entity that holds these active certifications. But otherwise, the other processes in the registry on behalf of an air transport provider, on behalf of a customer of aviation services, on behalf of a logistics service provider, can be executed by third parties. That being said, as I said before, we definitely recommend that organizations manage their own representation in the registry because we feel that that provides them the most agency in the process of how transfer and retirement works on their organization's behalf, and gives you a better look and feel for these mechanisms. But yes, technically, we've designed the system to enable the use of third-party intermediaries. Excellent. I'm going to take just 3 more questions here. Ishvan, Wendell, Chudo, if you're seeing any more that we should definitely respond to, feel free to take over the voice here and suggest one.
Well,
I found one more that may be worth clarifying live. From an anonymous attendee, can certificates be issued and retired before the fuel has been created? So essentially allowing PTL suppliers to pre-sell pre-SAFc. No, this is a functionality that the registry does not have, in part because the registry is designed, again, not as a marketplace, not as a trading platform, but as a place where the actual certified, verified information about a supply chain, once the fuel is produced, lives, to facilitate that accurate climate disclosure. So SAF certificates only come into being once the fuel itself exists. So that's not a way that the SAF certificate registry itself can be used, but there's potential for the registry to link to marketplace type tools in the future to facilitate a linkage. And we definitely know that those kind of forward-looking purchase tools play a role in this market looking forward.
So I saw a lot of questions regarding the whole certification process. Maybe it's important to underline that we are not doing our own certifications in the system. We are building on the certification systems that are provided by RSB and ISCC, which are the ICAO recognized sustainability certification schemes. So whatever that comes out of that system, we use that and we upload all that information in the registry, and we also provide a mechanism to verify these certifications eventually, as these units progress in their lives, and maybe additional certifications happen, that there is a possibility to update that through the assurance process. But we don't collect our own information on these fuels.
Thanks, Ishvan. And I'm seeing another recurring question here about double counting across registries. So I just want to acknowledge that and share an update on how our team is working on that topic. So there's a clear opportunity for registries, multiple of which exist, that kind of catalog the environmental attributes of specific fuel volumes to ensure that double counting doesn't exist between those registry systems, i.e. a particular SAF volume being represented in 2 or more registries conveying the same environmental attributes, which would be double counting. So this is something that there are active conversations going on about in the context of the book and claim community for heavy transport, within the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials in their registry recognition framework effort. And we anticipate being able to share more about how registries are working together to mitigate this risk and prevent this type of double issuance sometime in 2024. So definitely stay tuned on this topic. We're very aware that this is an opportunity for us to manage that type of double counting risk. And we're working closely with other registry providers to find a great workable solution to this challenge.
I found also an interesting question here, which sounds, who will own the data in the registry and who will be able to see that data? And I think that's very important, that the only publicly available data will be the retirement information. Everything else will be kept entirely confidential. And nobody will be able to see that apart from, of course, the registry administrators. But essentially, it's kept confidential. So, and of course, the data, by nature of this being a database, is owned by the registry owner. But under the terms of use, we commit to use that only for the purposes of this registry.
Great. Thank you so much, Ishvan. And thank you all for joining us today. These were great questions. We'll continue to stay on and ensure that we catalog all of these. And to the extent that we didn't have time to answer yours live or directly, we'll try to follow up with you separately. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us live today. We're really excited to engage with you on this platform more in the future. Please do reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to get on board and would like to set up a separate demo session. We really want to hear from you. So thank you so much again for joining us today, and hope to see you soon.